Welcome to this episode of UXD, where we will show you 3 steps to make your mobile applications awesome. In this episode, we're going to be covering the first step. I'm your host, Nazmul Idris, a developer advocate on the Android team, and I have a very special guest with me today.
Thank you, Nazmul. My name is Patrick Larvey. I'm a researcher here at Google, and I have a lot to say about mobile.
Ha! You've come to the right show. The first thing, as a developer, that you need to understand about delivering a good user experience, that it's always about the user and never about your application. So how many times have you seen applications demand to be updated, demand to be rated, demand new forms of payment, and demand your attention for a variety of reasons? Now, if you have a valid business need to push out a new feature or collect feedback from users, you especially need to be mindful of the demands you're making on your users' attention. So Patrick, what is the right way to demand attention from the user?
Well, this is a really good question, and nothing substitutes for a good, subtle knowledge about how users are interacting with your apps. So if you haven't done a little user research, I would suggest that you go do some before you tackle this step. But I think first of all, there's a distinction that we really need to make. There are times when you will absolutely need your users' attention. Maybe you have an update. Maybe there's something that's absolutely critical about continued use of the app. You need their attention. There are other times when you just want your users' attention. It's really important to distinguish these two because you don't want to wear out your welcome. You don't want to be that app that's constantly making demands on your user, whether you want it or whether you need it or you just want it.
That makes sense.
Think about it. If your app, it's just like the story of the boy who cried wolf. If you have an app and you're constantly alerting your user about things like, were you aware of this new feature? Are you aware that we have a new payment option? Are you aware that there's a new we have some new colors for your fonts?
Right.
The time when you need that user's attention because there's an update, there's a mission critical update, that user's going to ignore you.
That makes sense. So what are some things that developers need to keep in mind when they're asking their users to pay attention?
Well, first of all, let's share some examples about wanting versus needing.
Okay.
And I think the first thing is it's really important to imagine that your app doesn't just rely on the phone's battery, doesn't just rely on the network connection, doesn't just rely on the computing capacity of that device. It also relies on another finite resource, which is your user's attention. Wow. Let's say that the app has just gone through an update, and that update is available to be released. Let's say, in fact, that you have the most awesome pizza ordering app in the world. I am a big fan of that pizza app because that delivers the best pizza every time.
Yeah.
Think about this. If you have an update, it's something critical. But let's say that you're going to release a new feature that allows the use of text message to communicate between driver and the person ordering the pizza in order to make sure that delivery occurs on time.
Cool.
But this requires a new consent from the user because you're going to get the user has to say, yes, I give you consent. I consent to the use of the text messaging app.
Yeah.
Think about this. When is the best time to direct that user to the Play Store to update that app and to provide a new consent? Is it when they're ordering pizza? Probably not. The goal here is to turn a demand, I must have consent in order to roll out this new feature, into an invitation.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So you might want to provide users that have older versions of your application with information, with a message inside of the application that tells them there's a new version that's coming and what benefits they're going to get when they upgrade, like in this case, the SMS feature. So another thing you might do is that if you have their email address, you might consider sending them a short targeted message. And again, only to folks that are using the old versions of your application, again, to give them a reason for why they need to upgrade and the benefits that they're going to have when they actually perform the upgrade.
That's right. You want to avoid the situation where the person discovers a need for a critical update at the moment when I'm really, really hungry and I want that pizza.
Right.
That's not the moment. Another limited resource to take into consideration, as we all know, mobile devices can only operate for so long before they need to be recharged.
Exactly.
Again, we think of this as a constraint, but I think app developers should think of this as an opportunity because this provides you with an opportunity to delight your user. And it's an opportunity to think about how awareness of the phone's limitations can be a way that you can work with your user rather than against your user's device.
That makes sense. And again, speaking of finite resources, battery power is not the only one, but there's also network bandwidth, there's network availability, the amount of memory on the machine, CPU utilization, and also outside of the machine, the user's attention.
That's right. I think it's really important to be aware of the device's state at moments when this is critical to your app. For example, let's say you are an app developer with the most awesome cat video app ever. You know that your user is queuing up some awesome cat apps to watch, but you're also aware that that user's battery is down to about 20%. This is actually an opportunity. It sounds like this is going to be a disaster for your app, right? No. This is a moment when you might engage your user and say, you know, you only have, at the current rate you're going, this is only going to go on for about 5 minutes.
Right.
Might we switch to a lower resolution? Might we queue this for later? There are lots of ways that the app developer can say, all right, I'm aware of the limitation of this device. I'm going to turn this into an opportunity for my user to re-engage rather than being the app that's on when the device crashes.
No, that makes sense. And as we know, the internet was invented to share cat pictures and videos.
Yes.
So now, in addition to battery, another thing, I mean, actually, while we're talking about battery, one of the biggest drains on batteries is GPS. And I think it's important for developers to keep in mind how or when they should ask for high-resolution readings that consume a lot of battery life versus when they can do with coarse readings that don't require a lot of battery life. So for example, in that pizza ordering application you mentioned, it might be appropriate at different moments in time in the user interaction for that pizza ordering application to ask for really high-resolution location information from the GPS, which might drain battery, but it'll be for a short period of time. But for 90% of the time, or even longer, when the application is just sitting and you know, you haven't ordered a pizza, there is absolutely no reason for that thing to constantly ask for high resolution location updates, which will actually drain battery.
That's absolutely right. Again, you don't want to be the app that users remember as the one that crashed their device, as the one that drained their memory. And what Nazmul's saying makes absolute sense. Nothing irritates me more than when I see my GPS turn on for absolutely no reason when I have 5% battery left.
Exactly.
Remember, you want to look for opportunities to delight your user. You also want to look for opportunities to avoid the situation where your app is involved in a crash or in a critical incident. Because it doesn't matter if the user was only watching your cat video app for 5 minutes before their device turned off because it didn't have any more battery.
Right.
The user's going to remember that app forever as the one that drained my battery.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it was, let's say, that pizza ordering application, that was at fault. But because the user perceived that that cat order application was the one that was running when the battery went down, or that's all they're going to associate with that negative event. And negative events stick with us much more than positive events.
That's right. Here's a slightly different take on this topic. There are times, and this is a want. There are times when you want to get feedback from your users on how they like your app or how the app is performing or things that they think your app could do to be better.
Yeah.
Resist the temptation to ask your user to rate, share, like, or otherwise comment on the app at critical moments. Let's go back to the pizza app for a moment. Let's say you know that user's selecting pizzas, habitually selects pizzas, orders pizzas, chooses favorite pizzas,
right,
and has them delivered. What's the right time? What's the seducible moment in the usage life cycle to reach out to that user? Is it while he's ordering the pizza? Is it while he's waiting for that pizza to be delivered? Is it while he's eating the pizza? No. This is again an opportunity to turn a demand. You need good ratings.
Right.
You need feedback.
Right.
But you want to turn that demand into an invitation.
That makes sense.
You know when that pizza was delivered, I would say starting about 60 minutes post-delivery, that might be a decent time to ask.
No, that makes sense. So in addition to the 3 issues we talked about, here's some more best practices for developers to think about when they're actually building their applications. So coming back to this issue of updates, let's say that you have updated your application, like the pizza ordering app, and you need more permissions, but also as you've updated the new version, there's some changes you've made to the backend, and you need to basically move users off of the old backend into the new backend. So it's critical in this situation to to actually make sure everybody has migrated first before you turn off the old web services that you have running. And that is actually something developers or some application developers don't take into account, which leads to a pretty bad user experience. So when users of the older applications go to actually run them, they just stop working, which is pretty awful. And so you have to keep in mind that it takes time for updates to reach all the users of your application. So make sure that you're checking to see how many times your old web services are being used and so on before you actually decide to turn them down, turn them off. So another thing you might want to do if it's a really critical upgrade and you can't really wait, consider actually giving them an explicit notification. And this way, you know, at the very least, when they need it, they won't be surprised that it's not working anymore, because you've actually done the work and you've actually notified them ahead of time that they do need to perform this update.
And you know, this is also an important topic for developers to remember, because notifications can be super helpful. There are lots of opportunities to inform and to engage your users through notifications. But it's equally important that you don't have to turn everything into a notification. So let's say you've done your research, you know how your users are engaging with your pizza delivery app, and you know how to time that. There are good ways and less good ways to reach out for the rating or for some feedback. You know that you've done it. The users had the pizza and the pizza's been delivered. It's about 60 minutes. That's the right time to reach out to them. That may also be the right time to give them other notifications related to, for example, changes in payment. It might be an opportunity, other kinds of non-critical changes in payment options, changes in selection of pizzas, other kinds of non-critical things. You might consider batching these intelligently and delivering them at a time you know that the user is in a state of mind to pay attention to them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So now, so I guess the most important thing is that the timing is critical, and that understanding the difference between what is engagement and what is an interruption. So like in this situation, like if for example, I need to rate my pizza, like how the delivery was, it's not that the feature is a bad thing. I do need that feedback, but the presentation and the timing of when that feature is surfaced in the user experience determines whether the user actually is delighted by it or actually is somewhat annoyed by it.
Right. We can take an example of a notification that can be either an interruption or an opportunity to engage, depending on its timing.
Right.
Pizza app. Let's say something's fundamental is changing about that pizza app. It's going to use text messages to help locate where I am and to communicate with the driver.
Right.
This is a fundamental feature change. It requires the consent. If I receive an email about that, and I know that before I go to order my next pizza, that's an opportunity to engage your user and say, hey, there's I know why you're asking for consent.
Exactly.
I know that this benefits me. Awesome, I can't wait to order another pizza. If I find out that I have to update the app and provide consent as I'm ordering a pizza,
right,
that's now an interruption. Very same notification. Context determines whether that's an interruption or an invitation to engage. That
makes perfect sense. So again, as a developer then, it's critical for us to stop blowing foghorns in the user's face for every single event that might happen. So I've seen this in some applications where notifications are used as a way to debug things, which is obviously a very negative thing. And I've also seen persistent notifications, for example in Android, used to basically notify the user that an application is running or something is connected. Those are really bad and they need to go away, right?
That's right. So back to the story about the little boy who cried wolf, or Chicken Little who's telling us that the sky is falling. If I see that I have a persistent notification from your app,
right,
I'm going to think this app is telling me the sky's falling. I'll fall for it once, maybe I fall for it twice. I will not ever attend to that again. And the time when you have something really
right,
critical that you need to tell me, I'm not going to pay attention.
That makes sense.
So batching them intelligently, finding the right moment in the cycle of product usage to reach your user when that user is likely open and able to react.
Yeah.
These are critical aspects of mobile user experience.
Yeah. No, I think batching notifications is kind of like a subtle distinction where, let's say that you have determined there is a good case to notify user. For example, in Gmail, I have an email. I need to know that I have an email. But let's say I've received 5 emails. Like, it would get really annoying if I would get 5 individual notifications for that email, for 5 different emails from Gmail. So what Gmail does is really nice, which is it actually consolidates those 5 emails into one notification. And it says, hey, you have 5 emails waiting. And it does so for different accounts.
Yeah. I know that the people watching this have had this experience. I order from a service that offers 2-day delivery. And that service, which a lot of you use, tells me at every step of the way about each of the items. I don't really want to know unless A, there's a problem, or B, it's about to arrive at my door. Exactly. This is a great opportunity to batch. No, exactly. You want to be the notification, your app wants to be the notification that I receive just before I'm delighted because I've opened my package and I got what I wanted.
Exactly.
I think there's another opportunity here, thinking about batching and timing. And I like to think of this as think before you sync. There's nothing more irritating to me than when I'm on the bus, I'm usually on my way home, I've got about 20% battery on my phone, and all of a sudden, all of my apps start syncing.
Oh no. I
can see the battery declining. I know that I'm not going to be able to send another text message. Don't be that app. The opportunity here is to use the available data, the data that's available to your app, to know a little bit about what your users' patterns of activity are. By using what we think of as attention profiling, you can change how your notifications occur and when certain kinds of activities, how certain kinds of activities are batched and carried out.
No, that makes sense. So now this data, this attention profiling data, like it can be collected in a variety of ways. Like we could actually have analytics running, or actually pieces of code that are basically generating analytics data that are running on the device that then send all this information to the server where it's stored. Deeper analytics can be run, and then patterns can be predicted that actually notify the application about how a user actually interacts with it. Now, this data can then be used to determine when scheduling operations should happen between the application running on the device and whatever backend it's connecting to, right? Now, alternatively, if developers don't have such sophisticated ways to make this happen, there's a simpler solution, which is, let's say you have an RSS reader application and you have like hundreds of feeds that you subscribe to. It would be appropriate for that application to ask you when you first run it, how often do you want it to update? Do you want it to happen for every single change in your feeds? Do you want it to happen once a day, twice a day, once a week, and so on? So there's high-tech solutions to this and low-tech solutions, but the important thing is to set the appropriate expectation and also determine, like for example, what the user is expecting so that you don't disappoint them, even with these constrained resources that we have. So now, let's say that you do collect a lot of really high-quality attention profiling data. You can also consider providing this information to all the connected devices that the user has. So that means that if you have a signed-in experience, you can actually take advantage of the fact that you know something about how your users is using their particular devices or your applications on their device, and then you can use that data to drive the experience on all the devices that are signed into. And you could, so for example, with signing with Google, you can create a pizza ordering application that you run on your phone and on your tablet, and then depending on how you use your tablet on your phone, both those apps get smarter. So that's something which is, I think, a really big opportunity that that developers can take advantage of. And these analytics, the analytics data that can give you ideas of how the user uses the device, when they use it, where they are when they're using it, can give you strong signals about when you need to sync information, when you need to prefetch information, when you think that you should queue notifications. Let's say you're asleep, and if the device knew that, then perhaps it would not send you notifications while you're asleep, right? As soon as you wake up.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. So these kinds of things will allow you to deliver delight to users of your application. So that's all we have time for in today's episode. Stay tuned for the next 2, where we'll give you the other 2 steps in making your applications awesome. And thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you, and thank you for your attention.
Cool.